Hello, this is Chelsea, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to draw the straight line pattern that we practice in our Occupational Specific Essential Skills class for sewing machine operation. So every day in class, in our OSES class, we always practice drawing the patterns that we're going to sew before we sew them. And there's a few reasons why we do that. For one, it allows us to familiarize ourselves with the patterns before we try to sew them. And so we'll be able to understand the measurements that are involved in all of the patterns. And we'll also be able to practice our hand-eye coordination, right, which will help us when we're actually sewing the patterns, being able to use our hand-eye coordination to sew them correctly. And it also helps with our hand steadiness as well. And this pattern in particular is great for practicing hand steadiness because we are going to be trying to make straight lines across our page today. Okay, so let's get started with the demonstration then. So for today's pattern, what you'll need is a pencil, and I always say to use a pencil for these patterns. I use a marker in my videos because it shows up easier, but a pencil would be much better for you to use because it's easier to work with. You can erase it if you make mistakes. So I would say a pencil, and even having an eraser handy too would be good. You'll also need a ruler because we are going to be making some measurements today. And you'll also need a piece of paper like this one. I use 8.5 by 11 inch printer paper, and so I would say that you can use the same as well. Okay, so for these straight lines, firstly, we always start on the right side of our page, and the reason for that is because when we're working on a sewing machine and we're sewing our straight lines across, we always want to work starting from the right side of the fabric and then moving to the left, making lines going this way. All right, so we're going to do the same when we practice drawing them on our paper today. And we're only actually going to use one measurement for our straight lines. So the measurement that we're going to be using today is the 1/4 inch. So whenever we practice our straight lines in class, they're always 1/4 inch apart. Now, of course, on the sewing machines, with the sewing machines that we use in class, we can measure that by measuring the distance from the needle to the edge of the presser foot. But on our paper today, we're going to use our ruler. So the way that we find 1/4 of an inch, if we want to start at the beginning of our ruler here, and remember the beginning of the ruler is always the first notch. It's not the edge of the ruler here. We don't count this space. I'm going to count from this first notch here, and I'm going to say that that is 0 because that's our starting point. Now from there, I'm going to count to the right 4 notches. So 0, and then I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so then right when I get to my 4th notch right here, that means that this whole space from 0 to 4 is a 1/4 inch. So I know that every time I make a new line on my paper, I'm going to be lining it up with this notch right here. On my ruler, it's the notch right above the N and the C in inch. Your ruler might be a little different. Okay, so now that we've found our measurement that we're going to be using today, we can start our straight lines. And so remember, like I said, we're going to start on the right side of our paper. And I'm going to be finding my, be a little clearer, there we go. I'm going to be finding my 1/4 inch notch right here. And I'm going to be putting that right up against the edge of my paper. I'm going to be going at the top first, so that I can make a little mark for myself at the top. And so then I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. That brings me to the first notch. Make a little dot for myself there. Now I'm also going to make a dot at the bottom of my paper. again a 1/4 inch in from the right. So I'm doing the same thing down here. There we go, just lining up the edge of my paper with the 1/4 inch mark. And then I'm going to draw a dot as close to the bottom of the paper as I can. There we go. And so now my dot is just right there. Okay, so we know from class, and if you've watched any of the other pattern practice videos, that we never make our lines with the ruler. Unless we're making border lines, which need to be perfectly straight, we're not going to use the ruler to make the line. Okay, so I'm going to put the ruler away for now, and I'm going to draw my line freehand, right? Because we're trying to practice our hand-eye coordination and that hand steadiness, and so drawing a freehand line is how we're going to do that. So I'm going to start at the very top of my paper here, right where I made that notch. I'm going to make sure that my straight line goes all the way from the very top of the paper all the way down to the very bottom. I don't want any gaps here or here. I want the line going straight across. Okay, so I'm going to start here and I'm going to make my straight line, and I'm going to try to make it as parallel to the edge of the paper as I possibly can. I'm going to kind of use that as a guide as I go. Now I'm going to start off doing really short, light sketches here, and the reason for that is because I want to be able to control the line. So if you start off and you do a really fast line down, oftentimes what that'll do is it'll make you lose control of where your line is going, and it might start to go a little curved or a little wobbly. So I find that just going really slow and holding my pencil very lightly is the best way to get the line to stay as straight as possible. And if you find that you're going off a little bit, you can always go back and readjust. Or you can use that eraser like I mentioned before. You can erase as you go if you need to. Okay, there we go. So I made my first straight line. It's a little sketchy. I could clean that up a little bit. Mine's a little harder to do with the marker or the pen, but hopefully you find it a little bit easier when you're using your pencil at home. Okay, there we go. So there's my straight line, and now of course because we are, there we go. Of course we are pretending like this is a sewn pattern. And so what do we need at the beginning and the end anytime we sew a line? Well, there's going to be back stitches. And so I'm going to just draw in the back stitch at the beginning, right at the very top, and at the end right at the very bottom. There we go. And then my line is done. Okay, so now I'm going to bring back my ruler because I need to do a little bit more measuring. And then I'm going to just continue measuring 1/4 of an inch in between every time I make a new line. So now instead of lining up my edge of my paper with the 1/4 inch line, I'm now going to be lining it up with the last line that I sewed. So it's going to be a 1/4 inch from this last line to the next line. So I'm going to start again at the top, lining up that 1/4 inch mark as high up as I can on the paper, making another mark for myself just like that, and at the bottom as well. There we go. Now I have some points to start and then aim for. Putting my ruler off to the side again. And I'm just going to be doing the exact same thing that I did the first time. I'm going to be starting at the top and trying to make as straight of a line as I can all the way down following the edge of the paper as well as the last line that I drew, and trying to make it nice and parallel all the way down. Your goal is to have 1/4 inch in between all the way down on your lines. Alright, there we go. So then there's my second line. Again, I can clean it up, I can make it a little darker. Whatever you need to do to make sure that you have good quality in your work. There we go. And again, of course, I'm going to add in my back stitches at the top and the bottom. There we go. Okay. So mine are looking a little wiggly in spots. I think if I had an eraser, I would probably clean it up in some areas. So I encourage you to do that at home if you can. All right, and so then you're just going to be following that process the entire way across. I just did a couple here just as an example, but of course at home you can just keep going, fill your entire page with the straight lines. You'll know that they're straight if you get all the way across your page and they are still parallel with this left side edge. That's really what you're going for. All right, and so then after you do a few, it should start to look something like this, and you can just continue on from there. One way that you can check as you go if your lines are straight is you can fold up your paper just like this, and you can line up the edge here so it's nice and straight, and you can see on my paper that you can kind of see the lines through the back part of your paper, and so you can check if they're straight if you fold them up like this and they line up. So see here, my lines are straight through just like this. Okay, and so I would encourage you to check as you go and see, you know, if some of your lines are going off to one side or the other a little bit. Try to correct it, or you might have to start over. You might even have to take your ruler, make a new straight line down, and then continue on from there. Whatever you feel is best to make sure that you are enhancing your skills as you go. All right, so good luck trying out this straight line pattern. I wish you all the best. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.